Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to dig into something interesting.
Well, today we're going deep into the JFK assassination investigation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And specifically, how they handle the evidence.
Okay, interesting.
We're mainly looking at this 1988 article from the third decade. It's a whole journal, dedicated to JFK assassination research.
Yeah.
Now, listen, we're not here to, solve the case or debate all the conspiracy
Wait,
theories.
sure.
We want to see how they dealt with the physical evidence
Okay.
and see what that tells us about the investigation itself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's been decades, but so much of what we think we know about the JFK assassination relies on how they collected and analyzed the evidence way back then.
Exactly. And right off the bat, this article points out just massive confusion about the murder weapon itself. Just think about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about the rifle that supposedly killed the president,
Right.
and they can't even get the location straight at first.
Yeah. That raises some serious questions about how thorough they were in those first few hours. At first, they say it was found on one of the lower floors of the Texas School Book Depository.
Right.
Then it's on the 5th floor.
Uh-huh.
And finally, it ends up on the 6th floor.
Sixth floor, yeah.
That's a huge inconsistency for such a vital piece of evidence.
Makes you wonder what else they might have messed up or just, got wrong in all the chaos.
Yeah.
And it gets weirder because even the descriptions of the rifle itself were all over the place.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about those two witnesses who said it was a 7.65 Mauser.
Exactly.
Which is totally different from the Mannlicher Carcano they eventually pinned on Oswald.
I mean, how do you even mix those up? That's not some tiny detail.
Well, the Warren report just calls it witness error,
Right.
which, could be possible, I guess.
Sure.
But the markings on a rifle, those are pretty unique. Plus, Captain Will Fritz, the guy leading the investigation, even he thought it was a Mauser at first.
So wait, are we supposed to believe that a bunch of people, including experienced cops, all made the same, rookie mistake?
It's hard to believe, right? It almost makes you think that maybe they changed the rifle's ID after they decided Oswald did it.
Ooh, now that's a scary thought. Almost like they were trying to make the evidence fit their story,
Yeah, and unfortunately, this whole thing with the questionable evidence just keeps popping up as we go through the case.
Okay, well, let's talk about another big one, the magic bullet. Officially, it's Commission Exhibit 399, or CE 399. That's the bullet that supposedly hit both Kennedy and Governor Connolly.
Right.
Which is obviously a huge part of the lone gunman theory.
Absolutely. CE 399 is central to both the Warren Commission saying Oswald acted alone and what the House Select Committee said later, hinting at a possible conspiracy.
Right.
They reached different conclusions, but both relied heavily on that one bullet.
It's crazy, though, the story of how they even found CE 399 is just wild.
Yeah.
Some hospital worker says they found it under a stretcher, but no one can agree on whose stretcher.
It's a mess. Was it Kennedy's, Connolly's, some random patient's? The story seems to change every time they tell it.
It does feel kind of convenient, doesn't it? Like suddenly this almost perfect bullet shows up right when the autopsy doctors are struggling to figure out how Kennedy's wounds even make sense.
Yeah, it's suspicious. And then you've got Richard Popkin's book, The Second Oswald, where he says the FBI might have had 2 whole bullets at the beginning.
Hold up, 220 bullets. You think they maybe swapped them out? Like planted one?
It's a possibility. And there's more. This guy, O.P. Wright, he's the one who handled the bullet at first, right? In his first statement, he doesn't even mention it. Then later, he describes it, but it doesn't even sound like CE 399.
Okay, so we've got a rifle that maybe they misidentified on purpose, and this magic bullet with a discovery story that's full of holes, AND, might be a fake. It's like trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces don't even fit.
Exactly. And it gets worse. The deeper we go into how they handled all the different pieces of evidence, the more questions come up.
Okay, well, we're going to have to pick this up next time. There's so much more to uncover.
All right, so let's move on to something else that's caused a lot of debate. The bullet fragments they took out of Kennedy and Connolly. These were too small to really analyze back then, but years later they become important again.
Why is that? What made these little pieces so important all of a sudden?
Well, in '78, they used this new technique called neutron activation analysis on them. It can link fragments to a specific bullet, potentially.
Oh, so this was like their way of trying to prove or disprove the single bullet theory with science, right?
Yeah, exactly. But before we even get into what the analysis said, there are some big problems with the chain of custody for these fragments, especially the ones from Connolly.
Okay, so walk me through it. What happened to those fragments after they got them out?
So a nurse at Parkland, Audrey Bell, finds them. She hands them off to a Texas highway patrolman who then gives them to Captain Fritz. And get this, later that night, 2 of the fragments are given to the FBI. And no one knows why.
Wait, a highway patrolman? What's HE doing handling evidence in a presidential assassination? And why give them to the FBI without any paperwork or explanation?
Right. The article points this out as a huge EE red flag. No documentation, no markings to ID the fragments, just completely careless for such a big investigation.
It's kind of mind-blowing that they'd be so sloppy with evidence in a case like this. It really makes you wonder what else they messed up.
And the possibility of them tampering with evidence or even swapping it out becomes even stronger when you hear what Nurse Bell had to say. She described the fragments she found as being much bigger than the ones they have in the National Archives now. Plus, there are photos from Dr. John Nichols, a forensic pathologist, that show the fragments looking different over time.
So you're saying they could have switched them out at some point, like made the evidence fit the story they wanted to tell?
It's definitely possible. And get this, even Dr. Vincent Ginn, the guy who did that neutron activation analysis in '78, he admitted that they could have swapped out fragments to match CE-399.
Whoa, hold on. The guy who did the testing is saying it could be faked. That throws the whole thing into question. If we don't even know if the fragments are real, how can we trust the results?
Exactly. And the article doesn't stop there. It goes on to point out a bunch of other problems with the evidence from the Texas School Book Depository, which just makes you doubt the whole investigation even more.
Okay, well, let's get into those. We've talked about the rifle, the magic bullet, and now these fragments. What else is there?
For one, there's the shell casings. The article says they were found in a pattern that doesn't match how the rifle ejects them, almost like someone placed them there by hand.
More planted evidence. What's next? The paper bag Oswald supposedly used to carry the rifle into the building.
Funny you should mention that. The article says they didn't even find a bag at the scene. They made it after the assassination, using stuff they found in the depository.
You're kidding, right? So not only could it be planted, but it wasn't even real to begin with. What else is there?
Oh, and there's this clipboard that they say belonged to Oswald, which they found 10 days after the assassination. They were incredibly careless with it, which makes you question if it's even real.
It's just one thing after another. In any other big crime investigation, this would be completely unacceptable. With so much doubt surrounding all the evidence, how can we be sure about any of the conclusions they came to? It's like they took a puzzle and threw away half the pieces and then tried to force the rest together to kind of make a picture.
Yeah. It's scary to think that the story we've all heard about the JFK assassination might be based on, like, unreliable evidence or even evidence they tampered with.
That's why this deep dive is so fascinating. It's not about proving one theory or another. It's about looking at all these inconsistencies and seeing how flawed the investigation really was.
Right. The article doesn't try to give us all the answers or say definitively who killed JFK or if there was a conspiracy. It just raises really important questions about the evidence that the official narrative is based on.
And that's a lesson for everyone, no matter what you think about the JFK assassination.
Right.
It reminds us to think critically, question everything, and not believe something just because it's the official story.
Exactly. The JFK assassination shows that even when a case is this famous and has tons of investigations, the truth can still be hidden. And how we handle evidence, the chain of custody, the documentation, the analysis, that all matters if we want to understand what really happened.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? If we can't even trust the basic facts of a case like this, how can we trust anything we know about history?
It's a good question and a little unsettling. It should make us all a little more skeptical, do our own research, and never settle for simple answers. We have to remember, history is often written by the people in power, but it's up to us to question the evidence, consider different points of view, and keep searching for a deeper, more accurate understanding of the past.
And that's why we do this show. To make you curious, encourage you to ask questions, and remind you that there's always more to discover, even in cases that people have been debating for decades.
So keep digging, keep asking those questions, and never accept easy answers. The truth is out there, but it takes a lot of work, critical thinking, and a willingness to challenge the stories we've been told.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope this is giving you lots to think about as you continue to explore the mysteries of history. Until next time, keep your minds curious and keep those questions coming.